Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And we sincerely apologize to staff members and everyone out there. We've had a few technical difficulties this morning, but hopefully now everyone is joining us and they can hear us as we proceed here with the board meeting. First, I'd like to ask Board Corporate Secretary Ms. Ellison to call the roll and then let us know who from staff is on the call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Smedberg?
Present.
Vice Chair Gideby?
Present.
Vice Chair Goldman?
Present.
Director Horner?
Here.
Director Letourneau?
Here.
Alternate Director Meridian?
Here.
Alternate Director Graham?
Here.
Director McMillan?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Also on the call is General Manager and CEO Paul Wiedefeld. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ellison. Now we have an agenda before us for approval. If there are no objections, I'd like to consider the agenda approved as presented. Does anyone have any objections? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as presented. I do have one note. Mr. Horner has recused himself for the budget item, so Mr. Rouse, his alternate, will participate in that in his place during that part of the meeting. Next, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. We have 5 sets of minutes for approval. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at those, and if so, I'd like to move approval of these minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Thank you. Any comments or questions on any of those minutes? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Do I hear any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next, our next item on the agenda is the employee spotlight. Now for the spotlight and on behalf of the board, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all our employees who have stepped up during the current public health crisis to keep this region moving. Your unselfish and unyielding dedication to our customers has made the essential possible. You have kept this region working in unimaginable circumstances, and we are grateful for that. We want to recognize you today and say thank you for all you have done to help keep us moving. You are our heroes, and now I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Wiedefeld to introduce our video. Mr. Wiedefeld?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. I hope this video message helps our colleagues understand how much we value them and appreciate their service. By continuing to come to work to support and provide bus, rail, and paratransit services every day, they are making the essential possible for the National Capital Region. The Metro family lives in the communities that have been hit hardest by the COVID-19. And our thoughts and prayers today are with the Metro employees who have tested positive for the virus, including many who have returned to work. We wish everyone a speedy recovery. It's also important to reflect on the toll this virus has taken on our industry, on the transit industry. We remember those who have lost and honor their legacy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now show the video.
This is for those who, when times got rough, showed that they were made of tougher stuff. When they decided we would not be defeated, may they forever know their actions were needed. It was because they answered the call, standing tall, they prevented our fall. They may be the faces no one knows, but they're our time's unsung heroes. Because it wasn't an effort of just a few, tiny acts of love are what guided us through. One day our sons and daughters will ask how we crossed these turbulent waters. We'll say it was thanks to those who bothered. They were the best of us who carried the rest of us forward.
That was beautiful.
Very nice. Mr. Wiedefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That completes the spotlight.
Okay, thank you. That was very well done. Next, we'll move on to, would anyone else like to make a comment on that or have any words? Okay. Next, we'll move on to public comment. We have 8 emails from a Mr. Niles Pemberton of Fairfax County, Virginia, regarding the Silver Line shutdown. I will now read into the record the latest from May 21st. The 12-week shutdown of the Silver Line is dead on arrival due to, 1, the fact that the shutdown was decided with no public input, bad, insane, the limited bus capacity at Ballston, 3, the limited station capacity at Ballston Metro Station. Suppose there's a crowded platform and someone falls off it. It could be a bad scene, death, and a lawsuit could result. 4, the shutdown is just too long. 12 weeks is just unreasonable and senseless. 5, public inconvenience. 6, the no completion date for work at Wheelie Reston East Station. Why should the Silver Line be held hostage by work at West Falls Church, Dunloring, and Vienna? I have an alternate proposal that I think Wmata must consider. I am qualified to suggest because I'm an Eagle Scout, a JMU grad, an honorary member of a company of the U.S. Marines, and a veteran transit advocate. First, I would keep the Silver Line running on weekdays at 30-minute schedules from Largo to Spring Hill on weekdays until the tie-in work with Silver Line Phase 2 at Wheelie Reston East has been done satisfactorily. Cut back service to Tyson's Corner on weekends to save money during the pandemic crisis so Falls Church and Vienna can get some service, though in a different location. 3, a bus shuttle service would be available at Spring Hill on weekdays and Tyson's Corner on weekends to assure seamless connection with closed metro stations on the Silver Line. 4, a platform reconstruction work at East Falls Church goes on. Use alternate single tracking at East Falls Church so Silver Line trains can operate through the work zone satisfactorily without stopping. 5, keep East Falls Church Station closed. 6, start June 1st, extend Wmata bus and rail service to 10 p.m. daily. Last bus and trains departing terminals at 10 p.m. sharp. 7, reopen Clarendon and McLean stations, keep Virginia Square, Greensboro, etc. closed until further notice. 8, run the 3T from McLean Station to Ballston all times on weekdays and weekends. East Falls Church, Ballston, nonstop via I-66. 30-minute peak hours, 60-minute off-peak hours. 9, Orange Line shuttle buses between Ballston, East Falls Church, West Falls Church, Dunloring, and Vienna. 10, 1 extra journey on the 5A Metro bus from Herndon, Monroe to Roslyn, traveling east on weekday mornings and traveling west on weekday late afternoons. This would begin on Monday, June 7th. You people are optimistic. Retransit use. When the Orange Silver Line assemble reopens, if you stubbornly stick to your unacceptable plans, it will take a while for people to come back because Wmata and Fairfax Connector will have lost public goodwill and brand goodwill. I've taken psychology classes, and I have a friend who is a marketing major at JMU. He told me how important brand goodwill is to consumer, in this case, the transit passenger. There is also the very real possibility that the U.S. OPM could call U.S. government employees back at any time. Wmata must adapt the proposal of Mr. Niles W. Pemberton for service on the Silver Line. I know how to organize people. I am not above organizing picketing at the Wmata building. Thank you for submitting my comments, Mr. Pemberton. That's the end of our public comment that we received. Next on the agenda are reports by the advisory committees. We now have reports from our advisory committees available online as a copy of the Accessibility Advisory Committee's May report. As a reminder, the ACC report always addresses the previous month's activities. So this one covers April's meetings. The Riders Advisory Council report is produced the same month as its meetings. Because the RAC did not meet this month, there is no report. The RAC will resume meetings virtually next week. Any questions on that? And again, I refer you to the website for the Accessibility Advisory Committee report. Next, we have a COVID-19 update. I'll now ask the Executive Vice President and Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato, to give us an update on Metro issues related to the pandemic. Teresa?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of May the 28th, we have 125 employees confirmed to have positive COVID-19 cases. One of these employees is hospitalized at this time. One of these employees is currently in a rehabilitation facility. 72 employees have fully recovered and returned to work, with the balance of the infected employees recuperating at home, and we wish them well. Metro reports confirmed cases involving our employees. Contractors and members of the general public are not included in public reporting of COVID-19 cases. Employees identified as having close contact with an infected employee are notified and sent home for quarantining and monitoring of symptoms under the care of their personal health care provider. Identification and notification of any other close contacts is handled by the health department in the appropriate jurisdiction. In accordance with stay-at-home executive orders, Metro continues to discourage the use of our system with the exception for essential travel. Essential travel includes first responders, hospital staff, critical government employees, grocery and pharmacy workers, and others who must work during the public health emergency. We are continuing our coordination of a phased recovery with the local jurisdictions and are continuing our plan to keep service ahead of demand. We will provide future updates on our progress at board meetings. Currently, rail ridership remains down over 93%. Bus ridership is down approximately 70%. We have seen upticks in ridership, which correlate to nicer weather. Metro Access ridership remains at approximately 2,000 rides per day, and we continue to utilize a third-party vendor to transport customers with identified cases of COVID-19. Metro's pandemic task force continues to meet twice weekly. The task force has continued to advance our responsive posture with regard to the novel coronavirus through our recovery planning. Lastly, in alignment with regional authorities, Metro announced our policy regarding the use of facial coverings on the system on May the 14th. We've observed significant compliance from our customers, and we thank them for their willingness to work to slow the spread of COVID-19. We are continuing to keep our customers informed, utilizing email alerts and posting to our internet website using the status and alerts links. We also post statistics on ridership and positive COVID-19 tests amongst our workforce publicly. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my update on the COVID-19 response. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Teresa. Any questions by board members or comments to Ms. Impastato? Okay, Mr. Wiedefeld, anything to add to Teresa's report that you'd like to highlight before we move on?
No, just to mention again the impact that it's had on our employees. And again, a lot of these employees are in the hot zones within the region. So again, our focus continues to be on their safety and well-being.
Thank you. Teresa, thank you to you and your team for your continued work on this. We know it's, as we said earlier, a very challenging time, and really appreciate all you've done. Okay, next we'll move on to the chair's report. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Wiedefeld and his team for drafting a thorough, forward-thinking recovery plan for Metro. It strategically addresses how we operate in post-pandemic region by focusing our most important value, keeping employees and customers safe. We as a board appreciate the work you've been doing with our jurisdictions and key stakeholders, including the business community, to ensure we are successful as a region when we emerge on the other side of this health emergency. I encourage you to maintain this inclusiveness as we stabilize service and manage reentry. The region is counting on us to be a leader in this effort, and I know we will meet this challenge. The board also looks forward to monthly updates on the recovery. Finally, I'd like to thank those members of the public who participated in Metro's second virtual public hearing regarding the permanent lot closure and proposed parking changes related to joint development at the New Carrollton Metro Station. We look forward to receiving the public hearing staff reports for this hearing, as well as the one for the Grosvenor public hearing in the coming weeks. That concludes my report. Now I'll turn the floor over to the general manager for his report, Mr. Wiedefeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is focused on our three priorities, obviously safety, service, and financial management. First and foremost, I want to begin by thanking the District Fire Department for the response to a fire at the headquarters building yesterday. They extinguished the fire quickly and secured the building, ensuring that it was safe to be evacuated. We're grateful for their service and that no one was injured. The fire has been ruled accidental. However, the investigation is still underway and we are evaluating electrical causes with that. In other safety news, Metro began requiring face masks in our stations, trains, and buses nearly 2 weeks ago, and we found that most riders are eager to comply and take this simple step to help protect others. We have signs in rail stations and on buses to alert the public to this new requirement. To further promote the use of face masks, we are partnering with a local DC celebrity, go-go music artist Big G, who you see here on the PowerPoint slide here. A public service message is rolling out this week on our digital station signs and buses, featuring a photo of Big G wearing a mask and encouraging others to do the same. So we thank him for his time and effort with that. In terms of service, in service news, the expanded summer shutdown on the Orange and Silver lines got off to a smooth start with low shuttle bus ridership despite the nice weather over the holiday weekend. On Tuesday, the first weekday of the project, less than 1,800 shuttle bus trips were taken, about 5% of the pre-pandemic rail ridership in the shutdown area. As for the construction activities, demolition is underway at the 4 platform improvement project stations. Over the weekend, the project team focused on setting up the work zone to physically and electronically isolate it from the rest of the Metro Rail system. The construction team has been able to move quickly to prepare for and at some stations begin to remove the deteriorating platform edges. Our contractor, Kiewit, has implemented new protocols and procedures to ensure that construction crews are as safe as possible. And other staff, including our shuttle bus and customer information street teams, are also taking safety precautions with masks and other PPE. In addition to the closure of Orange and Silver lines, I want to remind everyone about the track work that will take place in other parts of the system this summer. This work will be conducted using targeted short-term shutdowns for track maintenance and upgrades. The schedule is planned to take advantage of low ridership and prevent delay to our critical state of good repair projects. The first shutdown begins on June 7th to allow work on the Yellow Line Bridge across the Potomac River. While no stations will be closed, Yellow Line will only operate between Huntington and Reagan National Airport. Customers traveling past the airport will need to transfer to the Blue Line to continue their trip. In last month's recovery presentation, we laid out a calendar for shutdowns through early July, which includes other work on the Green Yellow Line in DC. However, considering our need to respond to changing circumstances around the region, we will continue to monitor the ridership needs and may adjust the work plan if needed. Again, we all know that we're working as efficiently as we can, but we also recognize things are changing around us. In terms of recovery plan, a key part of the recovery plan depends on phasing and the restoration of service. To better understand when ridership demand may return to Metro, we are launching today an employer portal at the Wmata.com site. Every employer who has workers riding Metro Rail and Metrobus is asked to go online and tell us when your workforce is returning on site. It's a simple questionnaire that takes a couple of minutes to complete. This is an important way for our business leaders how they can help us inform our decision making as we open gradually and safely to reopen in the region. So this will be up today, this portal. In terms of financial, the first CARES Act reimbursement. Lastly, I am pleased to share that earlier this week we received our first CARES Act reimbursement from the Federal Transit Administration. This 112.8 million initial reimbursement funds virus-related operating costs and allows us to keep our employees on the job and continue to move essential workers as safely as possible during these unprecedented times. The CARES Act funds are provided a critical backstop following the sudden and extreme drop in ridership and fare revenue. This 112.8 million is the first reimbursement. 764 million of the CARES funding remains available to Metro for ongoing costs. However, additional federal financial support will be needed to ensure we maintain essential public transit service in the months and years to come. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks. Be ready to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiedefeld. What I'll do is we've done in the past, I'll go around in case there's any questions or comments for the general manager. First, we'll turn to Ms. Gideby.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
No questions.
Mr. Letourneau.
No questions.
Mr. Horner.
I have a few questions, the answers to which can be provided later if they're not immediately available. I had two principal questions with respect to the recovery plan. The daily trips on bus in May has touched approximately 130,000, but the recovery plan contemplates capacity for 85,000 daily trips on bus during the stabilization period. Would the management consider raising its sights for the stabilization period for bus capacity from 85,000 to 130,000, given that there's already robust demand for bus services today in order to stay ahead of demand? I can ask the second question now, if you like, or you can respond to that.
Yeah, I just on that one. Yeah, Mr. Horner. Let me just check the data to make sure I understand, how you're coming up with those numbers. But just in general, what we are going to do is allocate the resources that we have for the most used lines, again, to help support social distancing. So that's what we plan to do in the very near future. We're doing a pick, as you know, that will allow us to do that. So as soon as that is done, we will do that. And then we're going to constantly monitor what's happening on the demand side and provide additional services where we can, both on rail and bus.
Thank you for that.
I will get you more detail on those numbers to make sure we're on the same page.
Thank you. And my second question relates to the recovery plan as well, and is particularly detailed, and would appreciate an answer when you're able to provide it. The question relates to basically the amount of operating subsidy per passenger mile net of fare revenue for each of bus and rail. So I could ask the question this way: during the stabilization period, what is the projected operating cost per passenger mile for rail, and separately for bus, again, net of fare box revenues or other operating revenues? I'm focusing on whether during the stabilization period of our recovery plan, there will be we'll be in a situation in which the subsidy per passenger mile for rail greatly exceeds that for bus, and in that respect could work sort of a regressive subsidy dynamic, given that the users of rail are generally better off and the users of bus are low income generally. That's a question. So I guess the specific data, and it's only going to be an estimate, is the net subsidy per passenger mile on bus and rail during the stabilization period.
Okay, we can pull that together. We'll do that as part of maybe the monthly report. We can just, again, since the numbers will be real then, we can do it on what we've seen to date through May, and then we continue that into the future.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Horner, thank you. Mr. Marudi.
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, are you on mute?
No questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Nothing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wiedefeld. Again, appreciate all the work you and your team are doing. Next, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. McMillan, who is chair of the Finance and Capital Committee, for his committee report. As a reminder, Mr. Rouse will be participating in this vote as Mr. Horner has recused himself. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The following item was referred to the board at the May 14th Finance and Capital Committee meeting. Revised FY 2021 operating budget. Staff sought approval to amend the FY 2021 operating budget, including deferring FY 2021 fare and service changes for 6 months to balance the budget in response to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on revenues and expenses and to reduce jurisdictional subsidy needs. The board will continue to review the operating budget with staff as Metro moves forward with its recovery plans. Mr. Chairman, I move approval of this item with the following amendments. Delete in its entirety Attachment D provided by the Finance and Capital Committee on May 14th, 2020, and replace with the Attachment D attached here to, and this is the attachment that was sent around earlier this morning. For the information of my colleagues, the revised Attachment D reproduces in its entirety the table of subsidy contributions approved by the board on April 2nd, with the only change being the addition of new columns reflecting the $135 million subsidy credit. The version we saw earlier this week and that was considered in committee was a simplified version of that table. What I put before you now is a more complete explanation of the subsidy picture for the jurisdictions. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Aniseki or Mr. Wiedefeld, any comment on the addition there, the changes, or the proposed amendment?
No, this is Paul. This is Paul Wiedefeld. No, it was just to provide more information, more detailed information to the board for their consideration.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll go around the table here, so to speak. Ms. Gideby, any questions or comments?
No questions or comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman?
I do have some comments, but I think we need a second first on Mr. McMillan's motion.
Okay. All right. Is there a second on Mr.
I'll make the second.
Mr. Goldman.
I'll make the second.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take a few minutes this morning to reiterate the comments I made about the revenue forecast being too aggressive that I made at the May 14th Finance Committee meeting. I want to thank Mr. Aniseki and staff for providing the month-to-month revenue forecast document that was provided yesterday to the board members. It shows that passenger revenue is forecast in the final quarter of the coming fiscal year, that's April, May, and June 2021, in the range of 51 million to 54 million. And when you compare that with the original budget forecast of roughly 60 million per month, based on a total 12-month passenger revenue forecast of 722 million annually, it's clear that we are forecasting 85 to 90% of pre-COVID levels of revenue in the final quarter of the upcoming fiscal year. So this supports the view I expressed 2 weeks ago, that this is a very aggressive, a very optimistic revenue forecast. It assumes the return to normal, near normal ridership conditions by the fourth quarter of fiscal year 21, that there will be an end of social distancing and that there will be therapeutics and a vaccine available and widely distributed to individuals in the community, including our riders by then, which seems to me few experts seem to project that we will be at that point by early next year. So I implore my colleagues that this is a budget that will need to be reviewed every 2 to 3 months to see if the revenue and ridership projections are on the mark. If not, the risk is that we will have less passengers, less revenue, and we'll have to fill that budget gap with either further delay of the fare and service proposals that we are delaying 6 months by today's vote, or more subsidy funds from the funding jurisdictions, or more budget cuts than are currently in the budget before us. In summary, we face a very difficult path ahead as we begin the new fiscal year, FY21, in 1 month's time. And I urge us all to be paying close attention to the ridership and revenue numbers as we go forward into that fiscal year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Rouse?
No comments from me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rouse. Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take a moment to thank the Wmata staff for working with the jurisdictions on providing relief and ensuring that the CARES Act subsidy money was in fact used to reduce the subsidy credit. There's $34 million of relief going to Virginia jurisdictions, as well as 51 to Maryland and 48 to the districts. That's a significant amount of money, and given the concerns that we've heard from jurisdictions trying to make their own operating budgets for this coming fiscal year, this is going to be very welcome relief, significant relief for them and their bills. So obviously it's a very, very fluid situation. We don't know how long we'll need CARES Act money at Metro either. And we don't know what future congressional action might be, but I think this is a good first step and a reasonable first step to provide certainty to jurisdictions so they know at least they're going to get this discount, and then also certainty for our own operations so we know really for the foreseeable future in the next several quarters how we're going to be operating. So I thank the staff for this and I'm fully supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Mr. Mehroutian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo Mr. Letourneau's thanks to the staff for their hard work on this, and I also want to thank Mr. McMillan for his leadership of our committee in getting us to this place.
Thank you, Jeff. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to echo the concerns of Mr. Goldman, but also commend staff for bringing us to this point. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen, any final comments from you
Mr.
before
Chairman.
we move on?
No.
No? Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Mr. McMillan, a second by Mr. Goldman. Ms. Ellison, please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gideby?
Aye.
Vice Chair Goldman?
Aye.
Alternate Director Rouse?
Aye.
Director Letourneau?
Aye.
Alternate Director Mehroutian?
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham?
Aye.
Director McMillan?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. Mr. McMillan, does the committee have any further business to report?
This concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Steve, as Jeff said, thank you so much for all your work on the board's behalf and the interactions with staff that doesn't get a lot of attention because people don't see what goes into being the finance chair. So thank you for all your work on this. Now we'll move on to the consent items. We have 2 items on the board's consent agenda today. I'd like to move approval of the following. First, the Potomac Yard reimbursable budget amendment. Staff requests board approval to first increase the Potomac Yard Station project reimbursable budget by $50 million for design and construction of Southwest Access. Authorize the GM CEO to negotiate and execute a funding agreement with the City of Alexandria, and to amend the FY 2021 through 2026 jurisdictional reimbursable amounts shown in Resolution 2020-09 to account for the increased budget for this project. And second, the Landover Connection Agreement. Staff requests board approval to negotiate and execute a connection agreement with Old Line Realty Company for access to the Landover Metro Rail Station. So I'd like to move approval of both those items. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. So there's a second. Before we turn it over, Mr. Wiedefeld, any comments or questions or any comments from you on either of these items?
No, we've worked very closely with the local entities, local jurisdictions where these projects are, and they're, as you can imagine, high priorities for them.
And I know there's been no concern from the two jurisdictions on either of these either. So, Ms. Ellison, with that, we'll move ahead. Please administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gideby,
Aye.
Vice Chair Goldman,
Aye.
Director Horner,
Aye.
Director Letourneau,
Aye.
Alternate Director Meridian,
Aye.
Alternate Director Graham,
Aye.
Director McMillan.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. So these items are approved. Next, we'll move on to the reports by the jurisdiction. NVTC, Matt, anything you'd like to add for NVTC this morning?
No, just that.
You're on mute, Matt.
Thought I had unmuted it, but it didn't work. Just that NVTC staff is working closely with the Virginia jurisdictions on the Silver and Orange Line shutdown shuttle service. There are some concerns about shuttle service to some of the stations that are not currently receiving rail service, but Wmata has been, I think, responsive to those to this point, and is certainly willing to consider that when it's warranted. Right now, the ridership is extremely low, even on the shuttle buses. But so far, there are no reports of anything disruptive happening. So, in fact, with the complete lack of vehicle traffic, there's actually some reports that the shuttle bus service is as fast or faster than rail service was, which would probably not be the case in a few months, hopefully, but is right now. So we're continuing to have a lot of those discussions, but I know it's been difficult to contemplate shutting down the Silver and Orange Line the way that it has been done, but as we all know, that was really done for technical and construction reasons, and unfortunately there really weren't a lot of options given where we were at, so we're making the best of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. And I know you've been involved, obviously, because of your role on the Loudoun County Board and on this board. So appreciate that. And I'd like to also acknowledge the work of some of the Wmata staff, Regina Sullivan and her team, and others who have been reaching out to the business community along the Tysons corridor there, concerned about how the shutdown may impact the Tysons area. So thank you for all of that. Ms. Gideby, anything to report from DC?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman, WSTC?
Yes, next month, the WSTC, Washington Suburban Transit Commission, will be holding its semi-annual business meeting. It, of course, will be a virtual meeting. It'll be in the second half of June, and there'll be a notice of it in the Washington Post of a particular time and date when that is arranged. And I will be providing further information on the time and date at the meeting of the board committees in the first half of June for those who are tuning in to it at that time. So we ask you to follow the time and date and to tune in virtually to attend our meeting next month in June. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Horner, the federal government?
Thank you. Briefly, I'd like to take this opportunity to refer the board and members of the public viewing this meeting of the board to an article that appears today on page A2 of the print edition of the Wall Street Journal concerning the emergence of work from home policies being adopted by major employers in the United States. It includes some very interesting statistics and signals that to some extent the work from home phenomenon that we're observing now may become permanent. I think that these statistics and others that are forthcoming will begin to frame a discussion at a policy level for Wmata and the transit industry generally concerning the provision of service to the public and priorities for investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. If there's no further business before the board, we will stand adjourned. And now, in accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, Wmata contracts, or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government. C, personnel or labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations, consideration or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. D, contractual or other matters involving confidential or proprietary concerns, and the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interests of Wmata. F, safety and security matters where premature release would compromise public safety. And G, disposition of Wmata property and acquisition of real property for Wmata purposes where discussion in public would adversely affect Wmata's negotiating or bargaining position. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your participation and attendance. And again, apologize to everyone for some of the issues we had earlier and the delayed start of the meeting. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.